Hi everybody, this is Rainier Books. My name is Rainer. I'm a German who has been living in Sweden for 28 years now, and I'm also a Swedish citizen. I'm a dual citizen of Germany and Sweden, and this is my BookTube channel where I do reviews about books and I present new books and I talk about awards. Recently, I was in Poland and made a couple of vlogs from Poland. I've been to Krakow, I've visited the concentration and extermination camp of Auschwitz. I went to Warsaw and I went to Gdansk, and I came home just a couple of days ago. And this is my first real bookish video since then. And today I'm very happy because not tomorrow, but in 48 hours from now, we know the Booker long list of 2023. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that just great that we have something big to look forward to this week? Yeah, the Booker list is coming on Wednesday, and I have already predicted the Booker list many weeks ago, and a lot of other booktubers have done this. But what I want to do today is a great idea that my booktuber colleague and fellow booktuber Charlotte Malloy had a few weeks ago when she presented her favorite 13 books of all times that were nominated on the long lists of the Booker from 1969, when the Booker started, until 2022. That was Charlotte Malloy who started it. A couple of colleagues on BookTube have then joined Charlotte and made their personal Booker lists of all times. Among them Scott of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, our Australian friend. Australia is right now playing for survival in the Women's World Championship in football, but they're leading Canada by 1 goal to 0, scored by Hayley Raso. Also, we have a video from Angelia at Read and Reread. We have a video from Daniel at Guilty Feet, and we have a video from Brian at Bookish. These 5 people have sort of presented their favorite Booker books of all time. And I do my personal list today. So I won't let you wait any longer. Here are my 13 books. They're very personal. It's not the quality of the literature. I haven't read all those 289 books, I think, that were ever longlisted on the Booker. But I read some of them, I own some of them, and here's my personal list of 13 favorites from the Bookers. Starting, and as always, I order them by the last name of the author. So the very first starts with A, and even his first name starts with an A. This is The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga from India and Australia. 2008, this book was published. The White Tiger, there's also a Netflix film about this. This is the confession of a murderer, of a man who has murdered someone. And he tells the story of how it came to be, how he grew up in a very poor Indian village, how he then traveled to the city to become a driver of a very rich man in a very rich family, how they treat the drivers. And he's telling that perspective in a letter to nobody else but the president or the leader of the Communist Party in China. This is so beautiful writing, and this brings us to such a new world and such an amazing world that I put it on the list of the 13 book, my personal Booker dozen. The second author also starts with an A. It also is a man. He also comes from an Asian country. He is from Malaysia. And he has been living in England for many, many decades, I think now. This is a book that was longlisted for the Booker in 2013. This is 5-Star Billionaire by Tash Aw, one of my favorite authors. This book is about a bunch of people in the ever-growing city of Shanghai in China, and it brings us China so much closer, and Shanghai so much closer than anything I have seen on the internet. This is about a young girl from another Asian country. She's a factory girl. She comes to Shanghai to start a job that was promised to her, but that job doesn't exist. It is about Gary, a country boy who is becoming a pop star, who has become a pop star, who is spinning totally out of control. It's about Justin, who is about to expand his family's real estate. So there are people from different classes here. And of course, the man who gives this, the 5-Star Billionaire, this is a man called Walter Chow. His secrets and his schemes has a hand in the lives of each other of the characters. And It has been described as a dazzling, kaleidoscopic novel that offers rare insight into the booming world of Shanghai, a city of elusive identities and ever-changing skylines of grand ambitions and outsized dreams. I really liked this book. That's what brought me to Tash All, actually, and it's a part of my Booker dozen, my personal Booker dozen. Then a favorite of the favorites, one of the best books I read in my life, probably. Let me read just a paragraph from this book before I speak about the author. Bummy did not foresee the long-term negative impact of her daughter going to the famous university for rich people, especially when she returned home after her first term, wailing that she could not go back because she did not belong there. Whereupon Bummy applied a tissue or two to her daughter's eyes and cheeks and asked her outright and forthrightly, "Carol, have I raised a fighter or a quitter? You must return to the university and get your degree by hook or by crook, or I cannot vouch for the consequences of my action." This is, of course, you have identified it, Bernardine Evaristo's Girl, Woman, Other, the winner of the Booker Prize in 2019, sharing this prize with Margaret Atwood's novel The Testaments, a wonderful novel. The lives of about a dozen African or Caribbean British women and other and girls, and it's beautifully described. There's an art exhibition, an art vernissage that is uniting all these women. They all come together at a vernissage, but they tell the stories in different chapters, and it's a very lyrical book. It's very poetic, and it really gives so much diversity to these women and to their stories. It's a great book. I love it. Read Girl, Woman, Other. A book that I read a couple of years ago. It was longlisted in 2017. It's from the United States, the second woman author on my list. This is History of Wolves by Emily Fridland. A book that not so many people have talked about yet, I think. It is a book that deals with a 14-year-old girl in Minnesota, in northern Minnesota, a very rural area, very secluded area around a lake, which name I have not present right now. It's a girl who is spending her summer holidays. She wants to belong. She wants to find ground with her feet to stand on. She's very often away from home, and she meets this family and starts being a babysitter for the family. And then something very, very horrible happens, and there's a sort of an inquiry after the event that happens. And this 14-year-old girl is in the middle of the investigation, more or less. This is a great book, very psychological, but also very much nature writing in this book. I loved it. History of Wolves by Emily Fridland. The next on my list comes from South Africa, from a winner of the Booker Prize, but this is not a winning novel. This is a novel that I think it was even shortlisted. It was shortlisted, I think, in 2010. This is In a Strange Room by Damon Galgut, who won the Booker Prize in 2021 with his book, The Promise, which I also loved very much. But I think The Promise doesn't need any sort of appraisal or recognition because everybody knows it about it. But In a Strange Room, this is a story about travels. A young man takes 3 journeys through Greece, India, and Africa. He travels lightly, simply, to those who travel with him and those whom he meets on the way, including a handsome, enigmatic stranger, a group of careless backpackers, and a woman on the edge. He's the follower, the lover, and the guardian. Yet despite the man's best intentions, each journey ends in a disaster. A novel of longing and thwarted desire, rage and compassion, In a Strange Room is the hauntingly beautiful evocation of one man's search for love and a place to call home. It's a very small novel, In a Strange Room by Damon Galgut. The next book is Lost Children Archive by Valeria Luiselli. It was longlisted in 2019, the year when Bernardine Evaristo won. This is about a family traveling from New York City to, I think they go to Arizona. The woman is a researcher. She wants to find out more about the Apaches. And at the same time, it's a very hot summer, and people are talking about an immigration crisis on the southern border. Children are detained and lots of awful things happen, and this family is slowly falling apart. This novel is told in many voices. It's very intellectual, and it is a richly engaging story of how we document our experiences and how we remember the things that matter to us the most. With urgency and empathy, it takes us deep into the lives of one remarkable family as it probes the nature of justice and equality today. This is Lost Children, archived by Valeria Louis Selly. Number 6 is one of my favorite authors. Another one of my favorite authors is by Rachel Kushner. The Mars Room was longlisted in 2018. From twice National Book Award nominated Rachel Kushner, whose Flamethrowers was called the best, most brazen, most interesting book of the year, came a spectacularly compelling, heart-stopping novel about a life gone on the rails of contemporary America. It's 2003 and we meet Romy Hall. Romy Hall is a woman who has received 2 life sentences in a California prison for having killed a man. Romy was a prostitute. She was a call girl, if you want. And we learn a lot about San Francisco of her youth and the San Francisco of today. We learn about the prison where she's sitting, about a prison guard who's very much interested in her, has a lot of talks to her. And this is a novel about this character that Rachel Kushner has created, Romy. And it's also about the prison system, which is very inhumane in the United States. And the absurdities of institutional living. It's stunning and unsentimental. And Rachel Kushner says the publisher demonstrates new levels of mastery and depth in her work. Audacious, tragic, propulsive, and yet beautifully refined. I liked it very much, The Moss Room by Rachel Kushner. And now comes the book that I wanted to talk about earlier. It's from Canada. And I love Canada, as you know. And Canada is just now lying under with 1-0 in the women's, in the group phase. And they might drop out of the World Cup, sadly. But this is a Canadian novel that is on my list. Nevertheless, it's A Town Called Solace by Mary Lawson. Many of you will be surprised. Many booktubers loved this book, actually, when they reviewed the long list of 2021. But then they said, well, it's a beautiful book, beautifully narrated, but it's not something for the shortlist or for the winner. Well, why? I say why. It's beautifully narrated, and that's why I love this book. It's about a man coming to a small town in Canada called Solace, and this man has his past, of course, his secret. He inherited a house there by 2 older people. The woman who has become a widow, she gave the house to this man who comes to Solace, but she's in the hospital now, and there's this neighbor kid, a young girl who's taking care of the cat that the older woman owns, and she sees the young man as an intruder, and we meet all their fates. This book is described, it's narrated by the 3 voices of the child, of the girl, the older woman, and the young man. And it's a wonderful story. It's classic storytelling, and it's great storytelling, and that's why it is a favorite of mine. A Town Called Solace by Mary Lawson. There are 2 books that I haven't read on that list of mine. One of them comes now. It's Saturday by Ian McEwan. It was longlisted in 2005, and I got to read it this year. Saturday is a masterful novel set within a single day in February 2003. Henry Perrown is a contented man. He's a neurosurgeon, happily married to a newspaper lawyer, enjoying good relations with his children. Henry wakes to the comfort of his large home in central London on his day off. He is at ease here as he is in the operating room outside the hospital. The world is not so easy, not so predictable. There is an impending war against Iraq and a general darkening and gathering pessimism since the New York and Washington attacks 2 years before. On this particular Saturday morning, Perrown's day moves through the ordinary to the extraordinary. That can happen to each and every one of us. That we can get into a situation that is ultimately going to change our lives. After an unusual sighting in the early morning sky, he makes his way to his regular squash game with his anesthetist, my God, what a word, trying to avoid the hundreds of thousands of marchers filling the streets of London protesting against the war. A minor accident in his car brings him into a confrontation with a small-time thug. To Perrown's professional eye, Something appears to be profoundly wrong with this young man, who in turn believes the surgeon has humiliated him with savage consequences that will lead Henry Brown to deploy all his skills to keep his family safe. That can happen to each and every one of us. Saturday by Ian McEwan is on my list. The next book I loved, I think she was the youngest, of course, she was the youngest ever author, longlisted for the Booker last year. This is Nightcrawling by Layla Motley from Oakland, California. The story of a teenage girl, 17 years of age, in Oakland. She's Afro-American. She cares for her little brother. Her mother sits in prison. Her father, I think, is dead. And it's a very, very difficult situation. They have a swimming pool on their premises, but in the swimming pool, people throw dog shit bags, and it hasn't been cleaned for weeks and months. You can imagine how that looks and how that smells. The main character, Kiara Johnson, they're threatened by eviction, and what she does is, with her older brother who doesn't care about anything, he doesn't know about anything, doesn't know that bills are important, that you can get thrown out. He wants to pursue a rap career, and Kiara has to do something to get the money to pay the rent, otherwise they get evicted. And what she does is she's going to work the streets. She does night crawling, and she sort of gets into a story with police officers abusing her, having sex with her, and there will be a trial and stuff like that. It's a marvelous description of life in the less privileged parts of Oakland. Number 10 actually won the Women's Prize in 2017, but it was also shortlisted for the Booker. This is Home Fire by Camila Shamsi. A suspenseful and heartbreaking story of an immigrant family driven to put love against loyalty with devastating consequences. Isma is free. After years of watching out for her younger siblings in the wake of their mother's death, she's accepted an invitation from a mentor in America that allows her to resume a dream long deferred. But she can't stop worrying about Anika, her beautiful, headstrong sister back in London, or their brother Parvez, who's disappeared in pursuit of his own dream, to prove himself to the dark legacy of the jihadist father he never knew. This is about in England, about this family, this Pakistan-based family, this family with a Pakistani background, who came to London to live their lives with all the problems that this girl Isma has and her brother. But this is also about the conservative policy, in immigration policy in the UK, and about the war on terror that leads to, for some people, to terrible consequences. It's a great book, Home Fire by Camila Shamsi. Number 11 is a book where I read, I think, all 4 of them already now. It's called the M-Gash book series. But I take the first one here. This is My Name is Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout. Elizabeth Strout, an amazing American author. She has created this wonderful character, Lucy Barton, who is a writer herself, who comes from a very, very, very poor background in Amgash. And she gets married, she has a family, and at one point in her life she gets very ill. And nobody actually knows what she has, even the doctors cannot find anything, but she's placed in a hospital for a couple of weeks. And then her mother comes visiting her several times, and they sort of reminisce the time of Lucy's childhood and adolescence. And the fact is that Lucy actually does not like her mother, and her mother never really liked Lucy. But now the mother comes, sensationally more or less, to visit her daughter, and it's about this attempts to sort of construct a relationship, but also about reflecting about the past, about a childhood that has sort of paved the way for Lucy's life. It's an amazing story, it's an amazing novel, and the amazing beginning of a great series. You could also read O. William, you could also read Lucy by the Sea, and there's also a 4th title. The Light of Day by Graham Swift is the 2nd book on the list that I have here. I have it here, but I haven't read it yet. But that's absolutely something I want to read. The Light of Day by Graham Swift is about George Webb, a divorced ex-policeman turned private investigator, a man whose prospects seemed in ruins not so long ago. For in the course of a single dazzling day, and that's parallel to Saturday, isn't it? In George's life, the novel illuminates not only his past, but his now all-consuming relationship with a former client. Intimate and intricate in its evocation of daily existence, The Light of Day achieves a singular intensity and almost unbearable suspense. That's what I go for. Tender and humorous is in its depiction of life's surface, Swift explores the depths and extremities of what lies within us and how, for better or worse, it's never too late to discover what they are. And these are my 13 books. These are only 12. Reiner, you made a mistake. I didn't. Because yesterday I found out that I only listed 12, and the Booker dozen is a dirty dozen. It's 13, right? So I had to find the 13th book. So I looked at the long list of books on the long list, and I found a very, very beautiful small one that I liked so much from last year. And this is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, a book that you have to read if you haven't done so. It's about Bill Furlong. Bill is a coal merchant. He's delivering coal to households in Christmas time, a couple of days before Christmas. And it's about him and his beautiful, wonderful family. He has a wife and 3 lovely daughters. But then somehow he there's something that is not right in this little town that he lives in. And you get that from Claire Keegan's enormously crafted and very well sketched description. Something is wrong under the surface, we don't know yet, but then we find out a little later. This is a book about the Madeleine laundries, more or less, also, but it's basically about something lying under the surface, because there are always surfaces in our lives. In your town, in my town, where I live, there are surfaces, and below the surface, there's something that we maybe don't like so much. And what do we do about it? Do we anything about it? And this town, they don't do so much about it. The Madeleine laundries were a slave factory where the Catholic Church of Ireland held thousands of young girls and women as slaves. They had to wash in the laundries. They had to make money for the church, and they were treated extremely, extremely badly. This book is beautiful, this book is important, and this is the 13th book on my personal booker list, and this completes the list. And on Wednesday we get the real list, folks. So we have to talk about something else then on Wednesday. But until then, I say cheerio, goodbye, auf Wiedersehen, do svidania.